I'm here with Coach Jamie Pasquin. Thank you so much for being on here. For the listeners at home, will you tell us a little bit about your background, your motivation, and kind of where you are currently?
For sure. So, like you said, my name is Jamie Pasquin. I'm from New Jersey. I was raised in New Jersey, born in Brooklyn, New York.
Mm,
And my role as a strength coach, what I see is my job is to help raise young men and women.
mm,
And, it plays a small part, but that's my motivation behind it. I was fortunate from the time I was, probably middle school up
mm,
until now. I've had great mentors that
yeah.
have invested so much into me.
Mm,
So, my job is like pay it forward by
yeah.
being trying to create a better service for the people that I serve.
Mm, yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and background wise, how I came up in this profession,
Mm,
I started off getting into strength and conditioning. It's the typical story: high school, played football, got into the weight room,
mm,
saw myself respond really well to training, got faster, more
yeah.
explosive, more strength, and
Mm,
saw the impact that it made on my game.
yeah.
So that's how the interest really started, and then it evolved
Mm,
into that, helping people develop thing as I got into it more.
mm,
Um, and then from there I went to Springfield College,
mm,
which has a great tradition of, physical education,
yeah.
strength and conditioning,
Mm,
health, and all that. It's a very holistic model of
yeah.
teaching, spirit, mind, and body,
Mm,
which is something that really resonated with me.
mm,
Uh, and that's kind of a principal characteristics that I take through my training process is
yeah.
not just the physical side, but also the spiritual side,
Mm,
also the mental side, and teaching all of our athletes about that as well.
yeah.
Uh, from there, I was able to do some internships a bunch
Mm,
of different places. We talk about those more specifically if you like.
yeah.
But right now, I'm at Monmouth University,
Mm,
which is in New Jersey along the Jersey Shore.
mm,
It's an incredible spot to be at. I'm
yeah.
very blessed to be there.
That's awesome. Okay, so I mean, a lot of different questions that kind of come up. So I'm gonna try to synthesize these and be as concise as possible, right? But to kind of start, right, you talked about paying it forward, and so one of the ways that I think that you've also been able to do that, right, is kind of this recent work that we've collaborated on, and the gamut of performance, the Young Strength and Conditioning Coach's Guide to Success, right? You contributed a chapter, and so will you talk a little bit about your motivation and what your aim was with writing that chapter and what you hope to accomplish with it?
Absolutely. So the core foundation of the book
Mm-hmm.
was really to help young strength and conditioning folks or people that are maybe interested in strength and conditioning,
Yeah.
helping guide them along their path to
Mm-hmm.
be a competent coach.
Yeah.
So you did a great job, I think, at picking some categories
Mm-hmm.
that would be important to cover. And for me, my category was exercise selection and
Mm-hmm.
some programming rationale.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to give them was like a principled approach, so that you understand the principles of training and what you're aiming for.
Mm-hmm.
Then hopefully you can take those principles and apply it to whatever your setting is, whether it be high school,
Mm-hmm.
college, professional, middle school,
Yeah.
military, you name it.
Mm.
But if you have the core understanding of the principles,
Yeah.
then you can kind of put your own twist on things and apply it to your setting. So
Yeah.
that was kind of my approach.
Mm.
And understanding that this is not a high level, very theoretical thing. This is to be something that you can apply.
Yeah.
You can take the information, you can digest it, and then you can go out and apply it right away into the real world in a relatively simple way.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I found most valuable about it as well is like, principles can be super complex, right? I mean, we've all read like Super Training or at least scanned through it, right? And there's some high level stuff, right? And not to say that the stuff that wrote is not high level, but it's also broken down in a very manageable way. Like you said, like you can read it and you can apply it like that same day,
Right.
So that's highly valuable. Whereas like Super Training has to get like trickled down and you have to like, think about it, research some other things to help explain like what you just read. Like, you know what I mean? That's going to take a process. So I think that's one of the most things, especially for the population, right? These are coaches that are still developing that like might need to use it that same day or the next day or whatever. So
For sure.
that's awesome.
And there's a place for all of those. It's a spectrum of very simple to very complex.
Yeah.
There's a need for resources along that entire continuum.
Yeah.
Right. And like you said, something like Super Training, that may be at the far side of the complexity continuum, whereas something like this, can be a more accessible entry level
Yeah.
piece of information for somebody that's getting into the field.
Yeah, and for example, like I think that's a great way to put it. If you give someone that's just getting into the field, right, a high level book like that, it's probably going to turn them off, or
Sure.
it's not gonna they're not going to develop the same way. Same way that in the weight room, if we give a novice, right, something like an accommodating resistance, like that's probably not the most beneficial, right?
Right.
So it's cool to draw parallels there, and then kind of using that to launch into kind of our next segment, right? You talked about how you came up in football. So what kind of made you diverge from being a strength coach in the football realm to being a strength coach in Olympic side?
Yeah, that was a great question. So my sport in college was football. I played football at Springfield College, like we said, but before that, so leading up to college, my entire life, I played so many sports. So I played basketball for years.
Yeah.
I played ice hockey.
Yeah.
Played track and field. So although you may look at what somebody did in college, that's their background.
Yeah.
Really, you have to go back further than that and see that it is more broad than that.
Yeah. Okay.
So I had probably my biggest emotional connection to a sport probably was basketball. My family played basketball growing up, and kind of came up that way with cousins and aunts and uncles that were coaches. So I just happened to be better at football, so that's kind of the route I went through.
Yeah.
So how I got into Olympic sports, I think when you're a young coach, you need to get a variety of experiences, similar to the training analogy you use with books, right? You don't start with the most complex.
Yeah.
I think that you don't start as a coach with the most specific population in mind.
That's a good point.
You want to start more broadly.
Okay. Yeah, I like that.
Right. So it's just I tell young interns and people like this all the time, just like you wouldn't recommend to a young athlete to just specialize in one sport.
Yeah.
You wouldn't recommend to a young coach to specialize in one sport.
Yeah.
Right? So the parallels between being a youth athlete and a young coach are very close. So you want to get your experience with a broad range of sports, right? So you get an idea for different cultures, different team sizes, different coaching perspectives.
Yeah.
Every sport has a nuance in that. And then as you get keeping it broad in the beginning, and then as you're getting more development as a coach, you see what you like, what you don't like, and you get a little bit more specific into the the population you're shooting to help develop.
I love that. Okay, so let's dive a little bit more into the training, right? So obviously you have worked with a lot of different populations, and you've been around it from your experience in it to the teams that you've worked with, right? So what is your generalized from kind of a macro perspective? What is your approach to training and assessment?
Well, I think you have to start with the game. So you understand that for a student athlete or for any athlete that you're training, you're training for their sport.
Okay.
Right. So you have to first understand what is the sport.
Yeah.
What are the demands physically, psychologically? How long is the season? You start with that in mind.
Okay.
And then from there you just work. Or the way I do it is I work backwards from that.
Okay.
Right. So most sports, although they appear to be very different when you watch them, from a physical standpoint, there's much more similarities than there are differences.
Yeah.
We're all playing with the same human body. So from a training perspective, we're going to want them to gain competency in general movement patterns.
Yeah.
Right. So before you talk about max strength and speed and power, you need to have competency at doing things with quality first.
Yeah. I agree.
Right. Despite the sport. And then once you get that general competency, depending on the time of the year and the stage of their development, then you can start to hone in on certain physical attributes at a higher level.
Yeah. Okay. And then how does that change for specific sports, right? I know we talked about it being very general, right? But in the world of strength and conditioning, it's also highly influenced by sport coaches, right? So how does that look in terms of being able to give the sport coach or even these athletes, right? They're able to Google so many things and think, so many things are useful and functional. How do you kind of feed that wolf, but at the same time feed the wolf of actually driving improvement and adaptation?
Certainly. You touched on a good subject. the accessibility of training information right now is higher than ever.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Higher than ever. So that, and the kids see it. So, if you're following LeBron, if you're a basketball player, you follow LeBron James, you're going to see LeBron is in the weight room doing some type of training.
Yeah.
Which, you can look at it one of two ways, as a negative or as a positive. I tend to look at it as a positive because now our players understand that to be at your highest level, there's going to be some need for weight training or whatever it may be, whereas maybe 10, 15 years ago, the knowledge just wasn't there.
That's a great perspective. So, okay.
Yeah, that's the stance I choose to take on it. So we're trying to capitalize on that.
Yeah.
And now, what we're gonna highlight. So you take one training plan. So you have a soccer player and they have a basketball player, right? On the same plan.
Yeah.
Now they're gonna execute the same movements, same intensities, right? But how you pitch it as a coach to a soccer player versus a basketball player, you have to change your terminology and the examples that you use on how this training program is going to help them be better at their sport.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Right. So we're not going to bring a basketball into the weight room and do things with a loaded basketball, right? Whereas people may think that's specific, but the weight training we're going to do, the plyometrics, the sprinting we're going to do, you take that and you tie it into an example from their sport. So for basketball, it might be, all right, for a breakaway, you need to have a quick first step and then have a big burst so you get down the court and you can push your defender to the cup.
Yeah. Speaking in their language. Yeah.
Speak their language, right? Tie it into their game so that they connect the dots in their head and they can see, oh, this is valuable because it can help me do this specific thing on the court.
Yeah. I like that. Okay. So yeah, no, really like entering their realm versus bringing them into ours, right? Of physiological prep. So, okay. I like that. That's big. And then with that, right, what would you say your biggest influence in programming and the X's and O's is, right? Because as a young coach, I feel like that's our focus, when you first get into it, like that's all you want. And then as older coaches, like you have that pretty established, and then you kind of diverge in other realms and things to improve as a person and as a coach, right? But within that realm, what do you think your biggest influence is, or what do you like to refer back to?
Probably if I had to pick one as the biggest, it would probably be Charlie Francis.
Okay. And what about him do you think kind of resonates?
He helped me understand loading and the types of loading that are gonna marry well with each other on certain days of the training week.
Yeah.
Right. And then how to apply that to a training session. Right. And then how to apply the training session towards the training, more macro training goals.
Yeah. Okay.
He kind of helped to make it more clear for me to understand that, high intensity stressors should probably be paired with other high intensity stressors instead of doing, so the way I explain to my sport coaches is we don't want to have a really hard practice on Monday with a light lift and then a hard lift on Tuesday with a light practice. We may be better off putting a hard physical demands on the same day and then the easy ones on the other day.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So it's been bigger than just weight room side. It's also helped me understand how we can help our sport coaches plan practices, which ultimately probably has a bigger influence on the performance of our athletes than anything we can do just in the weight room.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you touched on a good point that the integration of the performance specialist, right, or performance coach, strength coach, whatever you want to call it, with sport coaches, right? That bridge has to be there. Whereas in some universities or some settings, there's still a pretty big gap, right? It's more of like, all right, I'm just going to hand the team off, right? But it's not as much of a conversation, right? Even if people say there is, checking in like for 30 seconds at the end of a lift might not be a real conversation versus like, all right, how do we actually want to plan and implement for the season? And then let's like actually use each other's ideas,
For sure.
So that's big. Okay. And
so that's going to be largely influenced by your sport coach.
Yeah.
So I'm fortunate right now. Our head basketball coach will come to myself and our athletic trainer, and we'll meet, and we'll say, this is what we have for the next week. How should we set up our practice plans?
Yeah.
What should our off day be? What day should be harder? What day should be easier, or
Yeah.
maybe, easier is probably not the right term. It probably should be a shorter practice because
Yeah.
the intensity is so high.
Yeah.
So that's going to be largely influenced by your sport coach, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm lucky that we have a head basketball coach who's about that life.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, and then you mentioned some methodologies of things that you like to implement, right? You talked about some sprints and some plyos and some weights, right? Are you kind of attuned, or do you like any specific things above others, or like what's your hierarchy, and how does that look when you put it on paper? Not necessarily specific exercises, right? But more methodology and like categories.
Yeah. So if you're training for me, it always comes back to the sport.
Mm-hmm.
So things that are going to be most similar to the sport are going to have a higher level of importance.
Okay.
So for a basketball player, sprinting,
Mm-hmm.
plyometric ability, the ability of a tissue to react is going to be very important.
Mm-hmm.
And now other things are going to influence that. So strength training is going to help with that to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
Flexibility and mobility are going to help with that to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think when you're training for an athlete for a sport, so not a general population person for general wellness, you have to always come back to the sport and say, how does this physical quality help for their game?
Yeah, and I kind of like how you put sprinting on there where as kind of one of the top tiers, which is fantastic. A lot of coaches will not necessarily train sprints as much, right? Because their rationale is they have that they have a more reactive type athlete, but at the same time, if you have a reactive athlete that is uncontrolled, right, then they're not going to be as efficient or effective. So just having some type of sprint training in there to teach them how to use their body and where segments should be in certain movements, I think that's hugely valuable, right? Like
totally. And if you're talking about things like ground contact time, you're going to get the quickest ground contact times with the highest forces when you're able to sprint at a higher level.
Yeah.
Right? So how does contact time influence basketball performance? Well, if you can, say you're going up for a rebound, if you can get off the floor quicker and higher, you elevate higher above your competition, well, you have a better chance to go get the rebound.
Yeah.
That's one specific example. But and then also, one argument I hear sometimes is, well, they don't reach a full or max sprint speed during the course of a game. And oftentimes they don't in basketball. If you look at a time motion analysis, you'll see that sprinting is a very, very small percentage of gameplay time.
Yeah.
But if they have the ability to sprint at a higher velocity, then any of the running, jogging, sprinting that occurs below their max sprint speed is going to be at a relatively easier intensity.
Yeah. So just kind of raising that level by increasing that threshold, right? So I like that. Okay. And so with that, we talked about, you briefly mentioned some technology type stuff. What technology are you afforded kind of at Monmouth, and what are you able to utilize to assess some of these guys, or if we're talking about basketball?
Yeah, so right now we have at Monmouth we have very little technology.
Okay.
We're at a point with universities at a point where they're investing into the weight room itself.
Okay.
So we're actually in the midst. This week we started a complete weight room renovation.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So it was quite outdated. So this will give us a much better training space with the equipment we need and the floor layout that's going to be much more advantageous to our athletes.
Okay, fantastic.
However, at Dartmouth College, so before Monmouth University, I was at Dartmouth College, and we had a plethora of technology.
Okay.
We had Catapult GPS units, VX GPS units, Tendo. We had 18 platforms. We had a Tendo unit at every single platform.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, Ivy League schools, man, they had the big budgets for that.
Yeah. Okay.
They had an endowment. It's serious. So what we were able to do there, one of my favorite things to use there was something like a Tendo unit where you can track the velocity and get instantaneous feedback on how quick the ball is moving.
Okay. And how was that beneficial? Yeah, within training for maybe let's say young coaches or even coaches that just haven't been able to use technology as much. What do you think is the best payoff there?
I think the greatest payoff by far
Mm-hmm.
is for our athletes because they're so competitive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you can find a way to put an objective number on
Mm.
something,
Yeah.
they're going to compete beyond belief.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beyond
Okay.
belief is incredible.
Yeah.
So you'll have, say you have the same training protocol,
Uh-huh.
and one is going to give you feedback,
Yeah.
so objective feedback that you can see right away, and the other situation is the same training plan, but there's no objective feedback.
Mm. Yeah.
Right? Well, I guess there's never no feedback because you either complete the rep or you don't complete the rep,
Okay.
which would be
In that sense.
a very small amount of feedback
Yeah.
versus something where there's a number on it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right now, you can use that to kind of gas them up to compete with themselves or to compete with each other.
Yeah.
And now you're just getting a whole nother level of effort on the session.
Okay. And that's part of that's tapping into being present, right? It allows the athlete to be a lot more present versus just kind of going through the motions. So that's a really good point.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And one of my favorite quotes is, they didn't come here to weight room, they came here to ball.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And that's true. They're here to play their sport.
Uh-huh.
And the weight room is a supplement to their sport to help them develop.
Mm-hmm.
But if they can come in here and they can find a way to get enjoyment out of it, and they can find a way to compete within the weight room, that's going to make the training process more fun for them, and then they're going to reap more rewards out of it.
Yeah, I love it. Okay. And so in this collegiate environment, right, obviously there's multiple teams. So how are you able to kind of contribute to an environment where various athletes can come in with, various backgrounds and train at high levels and even interact with each other and positively, and kind of all in the same direction?
Yeah, so great question. Because sports have such a range in their culture.
Uh-huh.
So when I'll speak about Dartmouth because I was there for quite some time, and we had such a broad variety of sports.
Yeah.
We had 33 sports.
Okay, 33?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
A ton.
Yeah.
A ton. And I'll just name some that I worked with, and you could see the variety there. Football, sailing, men's basketball, alpine skiing, men's lacrosse, women's basketball, women's lacrosse. So you have these cultures that are very different in their
very different. Yeah, I can only imagine what a sailing culture is like, right?
100%, right? And then socioeconomical background, where these people come from, and what their norms are of interaction. And there was certainly a learning curve for myself.
Yeah.
I come from a regular middle class upbringing, and my family before we moved to New Jersey, they were from Brooklyn, where they had to fight for everything they had, and now with relatively elite people come from elite families, and they play. Let's call it what it is. If you're doing alpine skiing, there's a threshold of financial income that you need to have to be able to play the sport. Yeah,
there's some silver spoons out there. Yeah.
There are some silver spoons out there, right? So there was I have somewhat of an edge to me, and try to channel that in a positive way. To help people and try to fuel them up. But I learned quickly that many alpine skiers don't respond positively to that.
Yeah.
It's quite uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I had to learn to adapt the way I coach and interact with people. To help them get enjoy the experience and then get positive training outcomes out of it.
Yeah. I think that's a great point, right? Again, it kind of goes back to entering their world, right? And just because they enter the weight room, it's not necessarily, again, them entering your world. It's how can you guys kind of merge and work together, because you're there to accomplish the goal of making them better, right? It's, you don't, like you said, they're not there. You don't win trophies for lifting, right? No. unless you're in, powerlifting or Olympic lifting, which they're not. So that's a great point, right? Of adapting to the population versus them adapting to you. So that's big.
Oh, for sure. My job is to serve them.
Yeah.
Right? Their job is not to blindly follow my my rules and instructions. And
Yeah.
no, my job is, and it's a cooperative process where there's feedback back and forth from me to them and them to me. But ultimately, my job is to serve them and their experience and their development as a student and as a person and as an athlete.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it. Okay. And so we kind of touched on this next part a little bit in terms of the assessment, right? So first part, what does the kind of general assessment look like? Like, what are some key parameters that like almost all sports are getting? And then moving on to how do we handle injuries even if they occur after we do all this assessment, all this planning, like everything that we can do, and injuries still occur, like how do we handle that? So 2-part question. Yeah.
Okay, so from an assessment, an initial assessment perspective, my approach is to first meet with the sports staff, right, and get an idea for what is their goals for the program.
Yeah.
Right. How did it? So now we're not just talking about physical assessment of the athlete. We're talking about an assessment of the program.
Yeah.
So starting from top down.
Yeah.
What are the goals for this program? Where is this program right now? Where has it been, and where do we want it to go?
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So
That's
if you
good.
just start with assessing the physical nature of the athlete,
Yeah.
you might miss that whole side, which is going to tell you a much richer story.
Yeah. Okay.
So you're not just if we just assess the physical abilities of our athletes, we're missing a huge portion of what's actually going on.
Yeah, and there's a lot to the story. So
there's a lot to the story, right? So once you get an idea for, all right, what is this coaching staff like? What are they not like? What are we trying to build?
Yeah. All
right, and then you can start with, obviously, this is kind of happening simultaneously because you're going to start training the athletes right away, right?
Yeah.
But I want to touch on that you really should meet with the coaches and go over those things and what their expectations are and what they're trying to build towards.
Okay.
And then when you meet with the athletes, one of the biggest things I'm looking for is movement quality,
Okay.
For lack of better terms. I'm looking for what strategies do the student athletes use to solve movement problems.
Okay.
So some people are going to be efficient in a broad range of movement problems, right? And some are going to have no solution to solve the problem, which would be like if we have somebody trying to run straight ahead, it looks like they have an efficient pattern, right? They can cover ground at an efficient rate, and then some other people, they may look all gangly, arms flapping out to the side, and that's going to be there's going to be a high correlation between something like that and if they can squat, or if they can split squat, or if they can do a push up, or things like that.
Okay.
And we'll look at all those as well through something like a warm up,
Okay.
and then so there's no specific. I in my practice, I don't have a session 1. This is the movement assessment, and then we start training. For me, it's a little bit more holistic, where we're doing all the things simultaneously.
Okay.
And
Charlie Francis approach, right?
Comfortable. Yeah, very similar, similar. And so what happens through that is the first few phases of my training are going to be very vanilla, right, in terms of exercise selection and intensity and volume and all that, because you're trying to figure out how they respond to the movements, to the volume, and to the intensity.
Okay, it's good. Yeah.
Right, and then so this may be happening over the course of a few weeks to a few months, and you're figuring out, and then. So an example from real life is I now work with men's golf, who has no training background. Yeah. Really, they've trained a few weeks every semester that they've been in school. So, for a senior, maybe they trained for like a month or maybe 2 months each term, and then not trained in between. So they have roughly no training history. So we're going to start with something like a 1x20 program where they're getting a variety of movement patterns, and then progressively going to overload those patterns as they increase their competency over time. Okay.
Good. No, that's good. I like that. Okay. I like how you use not necessarily like just specific, like people will just kind of fall back on the FMS, right? Just because, but they don't have a rationale in terms of like, all right, what are we trying to get out of it? It's just use it because other people have used it, and that's it. So I think how you are very, like you said, holistic, and what you use, you directly apply to training. You directly use to like drive decisions. And I think a lot of people can draw some stuff from that versus like, all right, we're just going to do FMS just because the athletic trainer is certified in FMS and that's it, you know? So I like that. I like that approach a lot. And I think a lot of people can draw from that, you know? So would you have any suggestions for other coaches who are trying to set up a battery of assessments?
Certainly, yeah. So, ironically, I would say learn things like the FMS.
Yeah.
Learn. Yeah, seriously though, learn things like the FMS. Learn things like SFMA, PRI, the new one RPR. Learn all these different things so you can more accurately have a model of how the body works.
Yes. Yeah.
Right, because that's really what we have. Every coach, every person has a model of the way the world works. Whether you're conscious of it or not, you have a working model, meaning that every experience you have is a new bit of information to go back into your model of how things work.
Yeah,
and to tweak that model, right? So if you learn things like the FMS and all these other, three-letter words that we just said, you can take bits of that, right, and bring it back into your model of understanding how things work, right, and you can apply that to your setting.
I like that. Okay. So now moving forward a little bit to the second part of that question. So how do we kind of handle injuries, right, when they inevitably occur?
Right. Yeah, so you obviously never want to see an injury occur, but it will happen, right? Yeah. You could be doing everything right. All the variables that you think are most important, you could be checking those boxes, but sport is chaotic. It's complex and it's chaotic, and there's many factors go into it. So injuries will happen.
Yeah.
Now, when it does happen, best practice is to try to figure out why.
Yeah.
Right, and then meet with your team. So your athletic trainer, if you have a sports scientist, if your sport coach, you meet. And you come up with a plan going forward, right? And that plan is not written in pen.
Yeah.
That plan is going to be written in pencil because you'll need to make changes and adjustments as the recovery process is going to occur. Okay. And one of the things that we'll see, sometimes people think of it as black and white. Either you're injured or you're not.
Yeah.
But as we know, when you're college athlete or you're an athlete in general, you're never going to be 100%.
Yeah.
Right? So you're going to be practicing through nicks and bruises and bangs and injuries. Many of our players will play through injury at times. Right? So the spectrum of from when the injury occurs towards 100%, like they're going to be playing their sport and practicing their sport through that spectrum at certain points.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to figure out how do you adjust either the load of the practice and the games, or maybe you take them out of certain drills, or maybe you take them out of high impact conditioning because they're already going to be conditioned from actually playing and practicing their sport. Right, so you find ways to keep the player doing as much as possible. That is the game itself.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, and then over time, if the recovery process is going along as we want it to be, they'll be getting closer towards the end of the spectrum of being towards 100%.
Okay.
Again, never expecting them to be 100%. It's just not realistic in the way sport works, and our seasons are 6 or 7 months long. Things are going to happen.
Yeah, we
want to mitigate or reduce the risk if they happen and reduce the intensity of the injury. But and then once if it does happen, going to be working them closer towards 100%, but also exposing them to the game so they can keep developing and helping their team.
Yeah, no, I love it, and that was going to be the next part, was like the modification. So I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. So no, that's awesome. Keeping them integrated, right, by whatever means you can. I like that. So,
absolutely.
Okay, and so moving on to this next segment, more leadership, continuing education kind of stuff, right? So what are some things you're looking at? I know from some personal conversations we had, your interest in some Carl Jung and some psychology. Have you been able to draw anything from that and apply it to, essentially your life, but also, your profession?
For sure. So one of my interesting through life, but I was really able to start getting into more in college, was philosophy. I was able to minor in philosophy. And, people ask you, like, what are you going to do with a philosophy minor?
Yeah.
It's like, well, you don't do anything with it. You just, it just influences how you understand the world.
Yeah.
So, a lot of my continuing education or personal development comes from the great thinkers of the past. Somebody like Carl Jung, or somebody that, going as far back as Sun Tzu.
Okay.
Or great thinkers are great thinkers, and they pop up across all periods of time, and you could always apply, the wisdom of that to your own life.
Okay.
Specifically Carl Jung. So I've been getting into some of that, and it's something that I can't read at night because it's too dense for me. I'll fall asleep.
It's heavy. Yeah, it is definitely heavy stuff.
Heavy.
Yeah.
And you have to sit with it, and it causes a lot of introspection because at the same time you're reading it, you're seeing aspects of your own self, and you're gaining a better understanding of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So self-awareness is going to be one of the biggest tools you have in your toolbox, right? The more you understand yourself and your bias and your influence and what your predispositions are in terms of behavior, if you understand those things, then you could, be a better practitioner.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Absolutely.
I agree, and it's I find that super interesting. So for myself, I haven't necessarily dove down the Carl Jung specifically rabbit hole, but for me it was Jordan Peterson who references Jung in like all his works, right? And I experienced the same thing, right? When I'm reading his book, for example, 12 Rules for Life, as you read that, it uncovers some stuff about yourself every like chapter, and you're like, wait, that derives directly applies to me, right?
Certainly.
So it's eye opening, and I think it's even to pull on this thread even further. I think it's awesome that like a lot of strength coaches or newer strength coaches, not newer, I guess like more modern, are starting to dive into more of these outside interests and letting it apply or pulling that into the strength and conditioning realm versus it being so homogenous, right? I think coaches of the past were a little bit more one track, right? Whereas I think a lot of more up and coming coaches are a little bit more integrative, and I think it shows in how much it's paying off and how much it's benefiting the field. Would you agree, or what would you say to that?
Definitely, and one of my biggest influences for that is Leonardo da Vinci.
Okay.
Right. So I read his biography by Walter Isaacson, and was the author, an incredible author.
Yeah.
And what I realized is that, so somebody like Da Vinci was a prolific painter, sculptor, map maker, engineer.
Yeah.
You name it, he got into it. And what he was able to do was take bits and pieces of, seemingly diverse domains and apply them to each other. So by his sculpting helped him paint better, which helped him draw maps better, which helped him be a better engineer, which helped him be a better thinker and philosopher.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So this, and they call it Renaissance man. But if we just have our nose in the X's and O's and the strength and conditioning and the physiology books, if we just do that, then we're missing a whole side of life that we can tie into our practice and help our people with.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I think it's our responsibility,
Yeah. And I think, like, just on a personal level, right, I think it helps you, it creates outlets for you to express yourself. It helps you, like you said, I guess, actually, even a personal and professional level, it helps you express your thoughts better and helps you relate to people, right? It just helps you be a better human being, I think, just to be able to get outside of strength and conditioning for even a short time, right? And get your mind off of it and refresh and recharge a little bit in that way. So that's really big. Okay, I like that.
Totally. And one of the things Carl Jung talks about is the shadow.
Okay.
Which is a concept that it's almost like your dark side. So and it manifests itself when it's ignored. So if you are just blinders on strength and conditioning, but you genuinely have other interests that you're pushing off to the side, because you're so zoom focused on strength and conditioning, then it's actually a negative because those aspects are going to come through in some way.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? But whether it comes from angst or it comes through by you having an attitude with people over time because you're frustrated because there's these aspects of yourself that you should be exploring, but you're not.
Mm-hmm.
It comes through. So the best thing you can do is find out what you're genuinely interested in.
Yeah.
And walk that path.
Yeah. And then that's awesome. I think Peterson references a concept, I guess. I think it was derived by Jung. I'm not positive. And I may be butchering the term, but I believe it's circumambulation, right? Where a different interest, they show up at different points in your life to help move you forward, right? So I think, you can kind of see that as people's development from youth to adulthood of like, all right, you found this interest, you kind of dive in head first, and then you achieve what you can from that, and then now maybe you're not so interested in that anymore. And it's just super interesting to see that that there's an idea for this thing of like you wanting to progress and just move forward. So
that's no man, that's a great way of explaining that concept.
Yeah.
And Jordan Peterson. So the reason I got into Carl Jung is through Jordan Peterson.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I read 12 Rules and I watched his YouTube lecture series that are just. It's incredible that this man puts out so much free, high quality content.
High level stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's out there, and like you said, when you're at that point where it captures you, roll with it.
Yeah.
Because it'll create a whole new understanding of your model of the world.
Yeah.
That you didn't know was even fathomable.
Yeah.
But when you experience it, then it makes your understanding of the world that much more richer, and we can help our athletes because we have now a better, broader, more understanding of how things actually work.
Yeah, no, I love it, and just giving yourself a little bit more dimensions so you can again apply it back to what you do and who you interact with, who are coming from different backgrounds, right? It only makes sense. It only makes sense. So, and then kind of bringing it back more. Focused into kind of the field of strength and conditioning, professional development for young coaches, right? We talked a little bit about this, but in terms of like applications for formats, resumes, cover letters, anything like that, what would your advice be on some of that stuff?
See somebody that can help you with it. Right?
Okay.
Don't just go in blind thinking, oh, I can draft up a resume, I can draft up a cover letter and send it out.
Yeah.
If you're in college, your university has resources on campus to help help you write those more clearly, more effectively, more professionally, right? So seek out the help that you have at your disposal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And if you're not in college or university, find a parent or somebody you respect in your community that is a professional and can help you with these things. Because when you're young and you're getting out into the field, it's a skill set that you have that's unrefined.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of people aren't going to be the best writers naturally. You need to be taught these things.
Yeah.
So and you need to practice the skill of it. So if you can find someone or a group of people that can help you with the task, do that.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to be much better for you that way.
Okay. No, I think that's good because, like you said, if you don't know what a resume should look like, it's hard to write a correct resume.
Certainly.
Right. So, especially I think in strength and conditioning, it's a little bit more unique because the templates and some of the things that people like to see are different from a lot of the general, business type stuff. So to get some direct, feedback and some direct like constructive criticism, that's going to be huge.
Yeah.
Because it's hard. Again, you can't just Google like strength and conditioning resumes. Not a lot of things pop up, right? So, yeah. Right. Awesome. Okay. And then kind of moving forward into this last segment here, we've touched on some of the topics and ideas, but first one being, if you have any, what are some quotes that you live by?
One of my favorite quotes right now, and this has been, I was exposed to this probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, is WIN. And what WIN stands for is what's important now.
Okay.
Right? It's something that we'll break down on with our athletes. We'll break down on WIN.
Yeah.
Right? And it doesn't just mean win the game.
Yeah.
What it means for us is what's important now. And what that symbolizes is what is at this very moment the one thing that is most important for me to be focused on or for me to be doing.
Okay. Yeah. That's good. That's heavy.
All right, so it
Yeah.
is, right, and
Yeah.
it's so simple, right? You may just hear us say win. You
Yeah.
say, oh yeah, they're just trying to win the game, but no, we're trying to focus on right now.
Yeah.
What is the most important singular thing that we can be focused on?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, because people say that you can't multitask, and really what we mean by that is you can't multi-focus.
Okay.
Meaning, at any one point, you could just be focused on one task. But right now, I'm focused on you and having our conversation.
Yeah.
Right? If I was cooking and folding laundry simultaneously, this conversation wouldn't be, we wouldn't be fully engaged with it.
Agreed. Yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
So by saying what's important now, it gives people a space, right? And in that space, it gives them an opportunity to think about, all right, what is the main goal? What can I do now?
I like it.
Right? So in a game, you say win. What is important now? Not what just happened.
Yeah.
You know, if there was a bad foul call, or if there was a turnover, or even if we made a 3-point shot, you know, that is over. What's important now? Not 5 minutes from now, not a few possessions from now. What is important at this moment? And if you capture the moment by focusing on what's most important throughout all the moments, you know, you're going to put yourself in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, that's very applicable, I think, to sport, but also to life. So I like that. That's huge. Okay. So what's the best advice that you've ever been given?
Best advice I've ever been given? Probably from my parents. And it's the idea that whatever you sign up for, you finish.
Okay. Go ahead and expand on that.
Whatever you sign up for, you finish.
Yeah.
So the specific example from my life where it resonated most with me was I was a freshman in high school. It was my first year playing football, organized football. And probably now we're probably in October, and I start getting antsy because basketball season's around the corner, and I want to start getting on the court and getting my shots up, and I'm like, you know, I'm not playing as well in football as I expected to.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to quit the team. No, you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
you're not.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to quit. It's not for me.
Yeah.
You know, I'm glad I tried. And like, no, you signed up to be a part of the team. So you're going to finish the season.
Yeah.
And at the end of the season, if you want to not sign up to play again, you don't have to. But you signed up to be a part of something, you're going to finish it.
Yeah. That's big. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the same thing. You know, it's a small example, but it applies broadly. It applies for when you set out to do something, you finish a job.
I love it.
Finish a job.
Okay.
And, you know, it'll be tough. There'll be times where it's like, I don't know if I can do it, but just keep at it. You know, chances are things will turn out pretty well, or you'll learn a great lesson from it.
There it is. Yeah. Okay. So in contrast to that, what is the worst advice that you've ever been given?
Worst advice, you know, it's funny. I don't know. I couldn't think of a specific piece of advice, but I have a pretty funny story. I was in 6th grade, and we had a substitute teacher in our class. You know, I have some rambunctious tendencies that I've had to, you know, iron out over my development.
Yeah.
Me and one of my boys are just being kind of hectic in class, and you know, nothing that's meant to be rude, or you know, you're just a kid and you're being kind of crazy, and the teacher is like, "You guys are just going to end up being gas station attendants when you're older." I remember, and that stuck with me. I'm like, man, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's just one of those pieces of negative feedback that you use as motivation.
No, that's I 100% agree. Right, those little things that you that are insignificant, right? That kind of just spur you on to who you are now.
Totally, and we laugh about it now because, you know, he's doing well in business, and I'm, you know, I like to think I'm proud of myself for being a coach, and it's just funny, man. And we still talk about that now. Yeah,
I love it. Okay. So kind of moving on with the same topics or same ideas. What is one of your biggest struggles that you've had to overcome?
Biggest struggles. So one of my biggest struggles is that I'm relatively easygoing.
Okay.
Right, which is good in many scenarios, but there's also some negative aspects to that. So as a younger coach, because I was so easygoing, I would just let little things slide sometimes. Or I didn't have the presence to say, no, this is the way it needs to be done.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's no big deal. Or, their foot's behind the line, it's no big deal. Or, the rep wasn't the best, or the set wasn't the best quality, but, it's just one, it's not a big deal. So one of the things I had to recognize that, and I'm fortunate to have great mentors that helped me recognize these things.
Yeah.
Right? And how to iron that out. Right? And learn how to integrate the skill of keeping your easygoing demeanor when it's appropriate, but also having a bit more of, what would a contrasting word be? Having the ability just to put your foot down a bit more and be stern and be like, no, this is the way it needs to be done. So that we accomplish what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, holding the line there. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. And I was fortunate. I started out as a coach when I was 18 doing internships. So I've had time to develop this skill set. But, so it can be tough if you're just getting out into the field doing your first internship. You're going to have things to work through. For some people, it might be they can't speak in front of groups, or they're so in your face about things that they can't relate to the athletes well. Right? For everyone, it's going to be something different.
Yeah.
For me, mine was the easygoing tendency, and having the mentors or finding the mentors that will help you through that process is instrumental to how you're going to develop as a coach.
Yeah, that's huge. And I can personally relate to that same one as well. So, I can agree how that goes. So, okay. And then last kind of question on this thing is, what projects are you kind of currently working on, and how can people kind of reach out to you and follow your journey?
Sweet. All right, personal projects. I'm working through the self-authoring suite, which is Jordan Peterson. He created a set of prompts or questions that help you understand your past, presently who you are, and your virtues and your faults currently, and then also write out an ideal future for yourself across a few domains such as work, family, social, leisure, and there's a few more domains, and you work out, so in your own words, what an ideal future for yourself would be. And it's something that I think anyone can benefit from. I've done it once before. I'm working back through it a second time just because I'm at kind of a new adventure in my life with, coming back home to New Jersey and starting to work at a new place. So I feel like it's an appropriate time to work through some of that stuff out.
Yeah. Agreed.
So that's personal. Professional, I want to start getting some speaking engagements. So I'll start applying to some state and maybe some regional stuff this year. Hopefully, some of that could come to fruition as we go forward. With the idea being, how can we spread valuable messages to people that are going to try to serve their athletes well, right? So I've been fortunate to have good experience. Now, can I take that experience and, like we said before, pay it forward to people who can hopefully take it and apply it to their settings?
I love it. Okay. And how can people best reach out to you and kind of follow that journey?
Yeah, so Instagram is probably the best way. My Instagram is Jamie, so spelled DJAMIE __. Okay. So the name comes from, you ever seen the movie Django Unchained?
Yeah.
The D is silent.
There it is.
That's where it comes from.
Yeah, I love it. Okay.
Big Quentin Tarantino guy.
Yeah, I love it. Fantastic. Okay. Well, Coach, thank you so much for your time. This has been great. Good to finally be able to connect on this platform and in this way. And I think, we had a great conversation. I think we hit a lot of things, and we're able to dive into some more deeper concepts that I think a lot of people aren't typically attuned to hearing. So I think hopefully that kind of sparks some interest and some creativity. But again, once again, thank you for your time, and look forward to connecting again soon in the future.
I appreciate it, Juan. We'll talk soon, man. And thanks everyone for listening.